Welcome to The Explainer. Okay, today we're diving into the world of the economic conductors, these institutions that are quietly shaping our financial lives. I mean, they're super powerful, often a little mysterious, right? And their decisions, they impact everything from your grocery bill to your mortgage. So yeah, let's get into it.
All right, let's kick things off with a pretty big question. When you hear on the news that interest rates are going up or that we're in a big fight against inflation, who is actually making those calls? I mean, who is really at the controls of our economy?
Well, the answer for pretty much every country out there is something called a central bank. And no, this is not the bank on your street corner where you go to open a savings account. Think of it more like the bank for all the other banks. It's this incredibly powerful national institution that's basically overseeing the entire financial system.
Okay, so if these places are that powerful, what's their main mission? Like, what is the #1 job that unites almost every single central bank on the planet, whether you're in Tokyo or Washington, D.C.?
It really boils down to one thing: price stability. Yep, their main task is to make sure the prices of everything you buy, from groceries to cars, don't shoot up or crash down too quickly. This is what you hear about all the time. It's called controlling inflation.
And for a lot of them, there's a kind of magic number they're aiming for: 2%. The goal is to keep inflation rising at just about 2% a year. Not too hot where it burns the economy, but not so cold that it freezes it up. It's that perfect Goldilocks zone they believe keeps everything humming along just right.
All right, so who are the heavy hitters, the biggest players in this global economic game? Let's meet the two most influential central banks on the planet. First up, you probably heard of this one. It's the Central Bank of the United States, the Federal Reserve, or as pretty much everyone calls it, the Fed. And let me tell you, its influence is absolutely enormous. A lot of people would argue it's the most influential central bank in the entire world.
Yeah, the sheer scale of the Fed's influence, it's honestly hard to overstate. A huge part of its power comes from the U.S. dollar. I mean, think about this. The dollar is used in roughly 90% of all global currency transactions. So what does that mean? It means when the Fed sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. Every decision creates massive ripples everywhere.
Now, the Fed's power isn't just in the hands of one person. It's actually spread out. You've got a board of governors who are nominated by the president. Then there are 12 regional Federal Reserve banks scattered across the country. And then, and this is the big one, you have the Federal Open Market Committee, or the FOMC. That is the group that meets 8 times a year to make those massive decisions on interest rates we're always hearing about.
Okay, let's hop across the Atlantic and talk about the other major player on the world stage, the European Central Bank, or ECB. Now, what's really fascinating here is that unlike the Fed, which just has to manage one country, albeit a huge one, the ECB has this incredibly complex job of setting the monetary policy for all 19 different countries that use the euro. Talk about a tough gig.
So even though that goal of price stability is pretty common, the playbooks these different banks use to get there, well, they can be surprisingly different. So let's take the Bank of Japan, for example. They are hyper-focused on keeping their currency, the yen, from getting too strong. Why? Because they've got to protect the country's massive export market. Now contrast that with, say, the Reserve Bank of Australia. Their official mandate explicitly includes achieving full employment right there next to price stability. Two very different priorities. And it's not just the goals that are different, it's also how they make the decisions. We just talked about how the US Fed uses a big committee to vote on policy, right? Well, get this. In New Zealand, the final call rests with just one single person, the governor of the Reserve Bank. Totally different structures.
And hey, remember that 2% magic number we talked about? Turns out it's more of a guideline than a hard rule. If you look at the Reserve Bank of Australia, they actually target a range between 2 and 3%. And New Zealand's is even wider, from 1 to 3%. So each bank is really fine-tuning its target for what it thinks its own economy needs.
These institutions feel so modern, so tied to today's economy, but they actually have surprisingly deep roots. I mean, the famous Bank of England, it was founded way back in 1694. But believe it or not, that's not even the oldest one.
Nope, that title actually goes to Sweden's Riksbank. It was established all the way back in 1668. That makes it the world's very first central bank. Pretty wild, huh?
So we've talked about what these banks are and who the big players are, but let's get to the most important part. Why should you care? Why does any of this actually matter in your day-to-day life?
Okay, let's boil this all down. At the end of the day, central banks control the amount of money flowing through an economy. They set the benchmark interest rates that pretty much decide how much your car loan or your home mortgage is going to cost you. And their biggest job is to keep the whole economy stable so that the money in your wallet is actually worth something tomorrow.
So the bottom line is this. The decisions made in these, kind of distant-sounding boardrooms have a very real, very tangible impact on all of our daily lives. They directly affect how much you pay for your mortgage, what groceries cost at the store, and even how healthy the job market is.
And that brings us to a final, really crucial question to chew on. See, most central banks are designed to be independent from the government. That's on purpose, right? To protect them from short-term political pressure. But that also raises a pretty fundamental question for any democracy. How much power should these unelected officials really have over our economic lives? It's definitely something to think about.